My name is Beatrice Langford, though most people just call me B. I'm 64 years old, a retired librarian who still alphabetizes the spice rack and keeps her books in perfect rows. For 40 years, I believed marriage was a kind of quiet library too, where every memory stayed in its place and every promise could be found again if you looked hard enough. I was wrong. That morning, the rain was steady, the kind that makes silence sound louder. I told my husband, Martin, that I was driving to my sister's house for a few days to rest. I said it lightly, as if rest were a small thing. But inside, something restless had already begun to move. He smiled, too easily, and asked if I needed him to pack my overnight bag. He had already folded my nightgown and tucked my travel mug into the side pocket. The gesture was too smooth, too rehearsed. If you've ever had that small voice inside that says, "Pay attention," you'll understand why I noticed every detail. The way his hand lingered on my suitcase handle, the way his phone screen dimmed when I walked by. He said, "Take your time, B. You've earned it." I smiled back, but my hands went still on the doorknob. Before I tell you what came next, I'd love for you to stay with me till the end of this story. It's not just about betrayal. It's about what silence can do when it's used wisely. So, if stories of quiet strength and calm justice speak to you, subscribe and follow along. You'll want to see how this one ends. When I stepped outside, the air smelled of wet cedar. Our driveway curved toward the road like a silver thread under the rain. I waved once through the glass door, but he was already walking toward his study. Through the reflection, I saw the faint blue glow of his computer screen and the quick movement of his fingers over the keyboard. My car engine hummed as I reversed out, yet my chest felt hollow, as if I were leaving something precious behind that I didn't yet know was missing. The drive to Ruth's house took 2 hours. The wipers moved back and forth like a metronome marking the rhythm of my thoughts. Ruth was my older sister by 4 years, widowed, practical, and endlessly patient with my need for order. She opened the door before I even knocked. "You look pale," she said. "You need a rest." Her living room smelled of chamomile tea and lemon polish. I sank into the couch, pretending to relax, pretending that the weight in my chest was simply fatigue. Ruth talked about her garden, about the birds nesting under her porch. But somewhere between her words, I heard another conversation. One I wasn't part of, one happening miles away in my own home. Martin texted once that evening, "Get some rest, sweetheart." It felt rehearsed, like a line he'd written in advance. I replied with a heart emoji, then stared at it, realizing how absurd it looked. A tiny red cartoon heart sent from a woman who no longer felt she had one. That night, I couldn't sleep. The rain followed me even here, tapping on the roof like an insistent thought. I scrolled through old emails on my phone. The joint bank account still showed his usual transactions: groceries, gas, utility payments, ordinary things that built the illusion of an ordinary life. But a new tab caught my eye. Preston Holdings. It wasn't familiar. I told myself it must be another investment he'd mentioned in passing. Still, I saved the screenshot without knowing why. The next morning, Ruth made oatmeal and asked how things were between us. I said we were fine, then changed the subject. She nodded, but didn't believe me. She never did. "You know," she said, stirring her tea, "Martin stopped by here a few months ago, asking about the house by the lake. Wondered what it might sell for. Strange question considering it's yours." I laughed it off, but something sharp flickered in my stomach. "Maybe he was just curious," I said. "Maybe," she answered. though her eyes held the kind of stillness that waits for the truth to surface on its own. By afternoon, I packed a small bag to take a walk near the water. The wind was softer there, full of the smell of pine and distance. My phone buzzed. An alert from our joint credit card. Another transfer, small but unfamiliar. I noted it, forwarded it to my personal account, and told myself not to worry. Yet, the rain clouds over the lake looked exactly like the ones that had followed me from home. Thick, gray, and patient. On the third day, Ruth left for her book club. I sat alone by her kitchen window, watching the road curve out of sight. Something inside me whispered that I'd left too much unsaid. I wanted to believe Martin was simply distracted, maybe managing our finances as he always had. But another part of me, the librarian part that lived for facts and footnotes, needed proof before the story could continue. I drove home without calling first. The sky was pale again, the way it looks when a storm has finished its work but hasn't yet decided whether to leave. Our street was quiet, the kind of quiet that makes you slow down without knowing why. When I turned into our driveway, my breath caught. His car was there, parked slightly to the left, just as it always was when he planned to stay home all day. The porch light was on, though it was still daylight, and through the thin curtain in the living room window, I saw movement, a silhouette crossing the floor, pausing, then bending over the coffee table. Another figure joined him, her hair pulled back, her hands moving quickly as she spread papers across the surface. I didn't move closer. I just stood in the drizzle, watching through the glass, the way a stranger might watch a play she'd already read the ending of, but wished she hadn't. My suitcase was still in the back seat. The rain pressed against the windshield, blurring their outlines into shapes that looked almost kind. I knew better. That was the moment the world shifted. The quiet life I had cataloged for decades opening like a book with missing pages. Before I stood in the rain outside my own window, there was a quieter beginning at my sister's kitchen table, a refuge polished by years of elbows and coffee cups. I arrived with an overnight bag and a careful smile, asking for a few days to rest. Ruth let the matter sit. Kindness first, questions later. Her porch light glowed even at noon because she likes welcome to feel permanent. I took the chair by the window and watched the gravel road vanish behind birches. The mug warmed my hands. Rest, I told myself. Don't invent storms. Ruth studied me over her glasses. You're sorting thoughts like index cards, she said. Does it help? It usually does. We talked about small things. Her book club's loyalty to paperbacks, the neighbor's dog, the bakery that slices bread too thin. I matched her lightness, but another rhythm moved beneath the room, a clock I couldn't see but felt. I checked my phone without meaning to. No new messages. She poured tea. He came by a while back, she said. Asked for the assessor's number who looked at your lake house years ago. Our house, I said, eyes on the steam. She heard the weight in that word. He wondered about prices, she added. Said you might be thinking of downsizing. That didn't sound like you. It isn't. My spoon stopped moving. Stillness told the truth better than talk. We let the quiet earn its chair. You've always handled the papers, Ruth said. Do you still have copies of the deed? In the blue folder at home, I said. Good, she answered. I don't like surprises that touch your roof. My phone buzzed. Martin sent a photo of hydrangeas with a cheerful caption. I typed thank you and set the phone face down. The screen reflected my hand, steady enough to convince anyone not looking closely. Rain drew a fine line across the afternoon. We folded laundry in practiced silence. When I reached for the last towel, Ruth spoke with weather calm. I saw him with a younger woman outside the coffee shop on Ashbury Road, businesslike, papers on the table. Gray blazer. Air went long in my chest. Did he see you? I don't think so. They were focused. She had a tablet. He nodded the way he does when he wants to seem agreeable. Her look said what words didn't. Agreeable can mean someone else already decided. I folded the towel again, though it was already square. He likes help with financial jargon. Maybe she's an advisor. Maybe, she said, and the words settled like a chair no one claimed. Dusk brushed the windows. I called him and let it ring. Voicemail answered. An hour later, another try connected, then ended after a single hello, like a door opened and shut at once. A text followed about the forecast and vitamins. Careful, courteous. Sleep wouldn't come. Rain visited the roof like an old friend, bringing news in pieces. At dawn, I moved softly through Ruth's house, grateful for small mercies that don't require thanks. The extra blanket, the note on the kettle that says good morning, the sweater draped over a chair. By breakfast, I had convinced myself not to borrow trouble. Still, I opened email and checked accounts the way a cautious person checks the stove. Everything looked ordinary, which felt like a disguise. Ruth sliced pears. You don't need permission to ask questions, she said. Start with your own paperwork, not because you expect a storm, but because every woman should know what bears her name. That landed not as fear, but as respect for the life I helped build. I told her I would drive back after lunch to pick up a few things. She set her spare key in my palm, the one with the tiny brass bird. When I stepped outside, the rain had thinned to silver mist. The road home was almost empty. I turned the radio off and let the quiet steer. Near town, a billboard showed a smiling family before a house with shining windows and a flawless lawn. It promised safety without words. I have spent my life cataloging promises. I know which fade when wet. The lake appeared on my left, a gray mirror held to the sky. I thought about the blue folder, papers meant to be boring in their certainty, the comfort of seals and signatures. I thought about Ruth's voice leaving space for my answers. I thought about the call that connected and cut. The street to our house tunneled through tall pines glistening with rain. I slowed as if the car understood some moments deserve approach more than arrival. I pictured the porch light on, the driveway curving as it always had, the window holding its pale reflection of a life we promised each other. I told myself I was only going to collect a folder and return before dinner. My hands were steady. My breath was steady. Even my doubts had learned to behave. I turned onto our street, where everything looked cleaned by weather and set carefully back in place. That carefulness was a message. Some stories prepare the page long before a word is written. I parked at the curb, not wanting the crunch of gravel to announce me. The key with the brass bird weighed more than it should, though it belonged to another door. I walked past the house once without turning my head, pretending to inspect hedges for hail. Then I stood beneath the eaves where rain ran like threads. The living room curtain breathed slightly. I lifted my hand toward the knob and stopped. I listened to the house breathe and felt the day hold its breath steady. I told myself again that I had only come for a folder, that I would not look for trouble. But trouble often draws curtains back even when no hand touches them. The day I drove back, the rain had stopped, leaving behind that pale sky that always follows confession. Clouds hovered like half-forgotten words. I told Ruth I'd return in the evening, but halfway down the highway I changed my mind. The Quiet inside the car felt too heavy to carry all the way home, so I decided to arrive earlier than planned. No warning, no phone call, just the soft sound of tires on wet pavement and a key waiting in my purse. When our street appeared, a familiar ache rose with it. The magnolia by the gate had started to bloom, wide petals the color of faint blush. Everything looked ordinary, too ordinary. My husband's car was already in the driveway. The sight should have comforted me, but instead it made my pulse slow in that strange way fear sometimes does. He wasn't supposed to be home that early. I parked across the street beneath the oak tree, the same one that drops acorns on the roof every fall. The house looked still, porch light on, curtains drawn, mailbox closed. I stayed in the car, listening. Somewhere inside, faint music drifted. Piano, the kind he plays when he wants to seem calm. I waited, watching the rhythm of light through the window. A shadow moved past. Then another. Curiosity is a dangerous gentleness. It starts with care, not suspicion. I stepped out, closing the car door softly. The gravel gave way under my shoes. My reflection floated in the living room glass, thin and trembling, like a ghost unsure which side it belonged to. Through the reflection, I saw movement. A man's hand reaching across the table, a woman's hair falling forward as she leaned over a stack of papers. I should have turned back, but stillness held me there. I edged along the side of the house, careful not to breathe too loud. The air smelled of wet soil and the faint sweetness of lilacs he had planted for me one spring. I found the spot beside the window where the curtain didn't quite meet the wall. Inside, the coffee table was covered in folders. I saw our last mortgage statement, his old briefcase, and a set of forms stamped with the name Ashbury Realty Group. He was pointing to something with a pen, his voice low but clear enough to slice through the glass. If she signs the power of attorney, the transfer will go through clean. The bank trusts her name. The woman nodded, her tone brisk, professional. I've already filled the seller section. Just need her signature. The appraisal shows good value. The LLC will take care of the rest. My breath fogged the window. I wiped it without thinking, and for a moment their faces turned clear. She was younger, early 40s maybe, sharp suit, confident eyes that flicked toward the clock more than toward him. Her hand rested near his on the table, familiarity without tenderness, business mixed with something unspoken. Martin leaned back. She thinks I'm paying down the loan. She doesn't ask much these days. She trusts me. His voice cracked slightly on the last word, but he recovered fast, smiling that careful smile I'd seen 1,000 times. Trust. Such a simple word to ruin a life. The woman, Camille, I would later learn, tapped a line on the document. Beneficiary update. The bank will send confirmation to her email, but I'll reroute it through Preston Holdings so it won't raise flags. Evan said he can manage the notary. He nodded again, folding the paper neatly, like a man folding truth into a smaller shape to fit his pocket. I stepped back, heart hammering, every breath deliberate. A drop of water slid from my hairline down my cheek, cold as realization. I turned toward the garden where the wind still carried that faint piano music, now out of tune. For 40 years, I believed home was a promise built on habits, watering plants, sorting bills, saying goodnight at the same time. Watching them now, I realized promises can be rewritten quietly, in ink you don't see until the light hits right. I walked around to the side gate. It creaked slightly. I paused, waiting. Inside, the woman laughed softly. The sound was light but wrong, like silverware dropped on tile. I moved back toward the car, shoes sinking into soft soil. Halfway there, I looked up at the house again. The curtain fluttered, and for a heartbeat I thought he saw me. But no, the light stayed steady, the movement calm. I reached my car, hand trembling as I opened the door. My reflection in the glass looked older than I remembered. I sat there, listening to the sound of my own breathing. On the passenger seat, Ruth's spare key lay gleaming, the tiny brass bird etched on its head catching what little sun had returned. I picked it up, turning it over and over. That small bird looked ready to fly, but didn't. I started the engine, but before I pulled away, I checked my rearview mirror. Through the rain-specked glass, I saw them both move toward the study, still talking, still busy with their neat betrayal. Driving away, I didn't cry. My hands were steady on the wheel, my heart not yet broken, only rearranged. Somewhere between the house and the highway, the truth settled in quietly beside me, patient as a passenger. I told myself not to act yet, not to shout, not to accuse. There would be time for understanding, for documents, for the kind of justice that doesn't make noise. For now, silence would keep me company, steady as the road ahead. When I came back that evening, the street looked washed clean, as if the rain had been trying to erase what I'd seen. But the truth has a way of staying, even when everything else dries. I parked across from the house again, headlights off, engine quiet. The porch light was still on, that familiar yellow glow he always left for me. Only tonight it wasn't waiting, it was watching. Through the window, I saw them again at the table. The woman's jacket was gone, folded neatly on the back of a chair. Her blouse caught the lamplight, a soft shimmer against the dark. Martin stood by the counter pouring wine, his movements careful, deliberate, the way he moves when he's trying to appear calm. I shouldn't have looked, but I did. I stood in the shadow of the magnolia tree and listened, because the window was open just enough to carry sound through the quiet air. Her voice reached me first, measured and confident. "Once the HELOC closes, we can settle the second account. The trust transfer will be smoother if we finish before the statement cycle." He set down the bottle, his tone lower. "And she won't know? Everything's under the family name. It looks routine." "She's at her sister's, remember?" The woman's voice softened. "Plenty of time." I pressed my palm against the cool siding of the house. That phrase, "plenty of time," it echoed inside me like a promise made to someone else. He laughed quietly, and the sound hit harder than any shout could have. They moved back to the table. Papers spread like a map between them. Bank statements, a printed email, a line that caught my eye. Preston Holdings, LLC. I'd seen it before on the transfer notice buried in our inbox. Now it had a face, or maybe two. Camille leaned closer, tracing a line with her pen. Once the beneficiary form updates, it routes through the holding account. No alerts to the joint login. He signs off as secondary. She's listed as inactive. It's clean. He looked at her the way a drowning man looks at someone handing him air. Not love, relief. "You're sure this will cover the debt?" "For now. But I need the commission. My mother's surgery can't wait." That sentence cracked something in me. Not because of pity, but because I understood how desperation can dress itself as reason. Martin poured another glass, slid it toward her. "You've done good work, Camille." The name confirmed itself in my head. "When this sells, we'll both start fresh." She hesitated. "And your wife?" He smiled. "She's sentimental. She'll keep the memories, not the property." My hand tightened around the key. The porch light flickered once as if reacting. A moth hit the glass near my face, soft and frantic. Inside, Camille gathered the pages into a folder, aligning the edges perfectly. Martin reached for it but stopped when their fingers touched. The pause lasted a breath too long. I turned away, leaning against the siding. My heart wasn't racing. It was steady in that dangerous, disciplined way that comes when shock decides to sit down and take notes. I noticed the mailbox flag raised. I walked to it, opened the lid, and saw an envelope addressed to our bank. His handwriting, the return address printed neatly with both our names. Inside, I could just see the edge of a document with his signature already inked. Hers, mine, still blank. I slid it back carefully, as if returning evidence to its rightful place. Then I walked to the edge of the porch, where the wind carried their voices in fragments. The notary said she'll confirm by email, Camille said. You'll get the notification to your account. Just reply approved and it locks in. Good, he said. By the time she's back, everything, will be settled. The sound of those words folded the night into silence. Settled. Such an innocent word for theft. I stepped backward, my shoes brushing the wet leaves. The car waited where I'd left it, quiet, patient, unjudging. When I sat inside, I didn't start the engine right away. I stared at the house that had once been my entire world. Through the window, I could still see them, two silhouettes against the lamplight, planning a future that no longer included me. A streetlight flickered overhead, and for a moment their reflections merged with mine in the windshield. 3 ghosts, each pretending they still belonged to something solid. The rain began again, soft at first, then steady. I let it fill the silence until the rhythm matched my breath. Every lie has a sound when you learn to listen for it. This one sounded like paper sliding across wood. I whispered to myself, "Not yet." The words felt like both a warning and a promise. I drove away without headlights, trusting the faint silver of the road. The town lay asleep, unaware that one house on Ashbury Lane had already changed its story. My reflection in the mirror caught the brief pulse of the porch light behind me, blinking once before it went out. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat by Ruth's window instead, watching the rain streak down the glass. For years, I'd taught myself to believe silence was peace. Now I understood. It was also a witness, and it had seen enough. By morning, I had made a decision. Not the loud kind that burns bridges, but the quiet kind that builds new ones in secret. The sky was gray again, the kind of gray that forgives everything it touches. I brewed coffee in Ruth's kitchen, the smell wrapping itself around me like a memory I wasn't ready to keep. She watched me stir sugar without tasting. "You've seen something," she said softly. "Haven't you?" I didn't answer right away. The spoon clinked against porcelain, a sound too small to hold the truth. "I think I've seen enough to start paying attention." She nodded, not asking for more. Ruth never pressed. She trusted silence to do its work. "Then start there," she said. "Pay attention." After breakfast, I told her I'd head home for good. She offered to come with me, but I said no. Some journeys ask for one witness only. I drove back under a thin sun that couldn't quite decide whether to shine. The streets were quiet, washed of the night before. When I reached the driveway, his car was gone. Relief came first, then something colder, the kind that follows a storm and leaves everything too clean. Inside, the air smelled faintly of wine and paper. The folder on the table was gone, but a single page had slipped to the floor. I picked it up. A transaction summary, dated yesterday, with a transfer to Preston Holdings. Not large, not small, just precise enough to be deliberate. I placed it back exactly where I'd found it. My hands were steady, but the room wasn't. I moved through the house slowly, letting my eyes gather evidence my heart didn't want. A second coffee mug in the sink. A faint perfume I didn't own. The study door half closed. His laptop sleeping beneath its black screen. I touched the mouse. It woke instantly, as if waiting. The screen displayed his email, unlocked. I should have looked away. But curiosity is the language of survival. A thread was open. Subject line: updated documents. Beneficiary switch confirmed. The name beneath it was Camille Preston. The message short: done. Will forward copy to Evan. I scrolled one line further. Attached. Scanned forms, all signed. The bottom corner held my name in slanted handwriting I recognized but hadn't written. My signature tilted left. The way it tilts when someone copies it from memory, not from love. I exhaled slowly. Then I took a photo. One click, one silent flash of proof. I closed the screen and turned off the monitor. The room fell dark again. Upstairs, the jewelry box sat open. My wedding ring gleamed like a question I no longer needed to answer. I slipped it off and turned it in my palm, tracing the engraving. B+M, 1984. Time had polished the letters smooth, almost unreadable. I placed it into a small ceramic bowl on the dresser, the one with a thin crack running down its side. The crack had grown over years but never broken through. Like me, it held anyway. The sound it made touching the porcelain was soft, final. I packed a single bag: clothes, passport, the blue folder Ruth had asked about, and the phone charger I always forget. Before leaving, I opened the window. Fresh air swept in, carrying the scent of wet magnolia. The curtain lifted and fell like a sigh. At the door, I paused. The house was too quiet now, but not empty. Every wall seemed to hum with what had been said inside it. I took one last look at the living room where we had planned holidays, birthdays, a future I now knew was already mortgaged. Outside, a bird landed on the porch rail, shaking rain from its wings. I almost smiled. Life, stubborn as ever, doesn't wait for understanding. I drove downtown, parked 2 blocks from the courthouse, and called Nancy Keller. We hadn't spoken in years, not since the library fundraiser she'd chaired. Her voice answered briskly, professional, the same tone she used to keep emotion in check. "B. Langford," I said. "I need advice on a financial matter, and I'd prefer discretion." She paused, measuring the weight behind my words. "Then come by my office. Half an hour?" "I'll be there." I hung up, sat quietly for a moment, and opened my bank app. The numbers stared back at me. Too neat, too organized. The calm surface of a pond hiding deep currents. I took screenshots, sent them to a hidden folder, then closed the app. Before stepping out of the car, I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror. My hair had dried in uneven curls, silver and soft. My face looked unfamiliar, not weaker, just different. There was something steadier in my eyes, the way glass holds light without breaking it. Nancy's office sat above a florist, the air thick with lilies. She greeted me with a handshake that said she already knew why I was there. "Tell me what happened," she said. So I did. Not every detail, just enough to sketch the outline of a betrayal still wet with ink. She listened, taking notes in careful, square handwriting. When I finished, she leaned back. "You've done the right thing coming early. The longer they move, the harder to undo." "What should I do first?" "Freeze what's yours." she said. And document everything, quietly, no confrontation yet. Her words felt like solid ground. Quietly, I repeated. She smiled faintly. Sometimes silence is the best courtroom there is. By the time I left, the sun had slipped behind thin clouds again. The air smelled faintly of cut flowers and rain. I walked past a shop window and caught my reflection between rows of potted violets. I didn't see a broken woman. I saw someone reorganizing her shelves, removing dust, keeping what still mattered. When I reached the car, the ceramic bowl came to mind. The ring resting inside it wasn't an ending. It was evidence, proof that even fragile things can hold shape until they no longer need to. I drove home one last time that evening, only to lock the door behind me and take the spare key from the porch mat. The sound of the lock turning was the softest kind of goodbye. Nancy's office smelled faintly of coffee and printer ink, that peculiar mix of warmth and precision. She'd cleared a corner of her desk for me, laying out a neat checklist written in her own hand. "We start with the simplest truth," she said. "Paper never lies. People do." I watched her circle the first line. "Credit accounts." "Freeze them," she said. "Every joint card, every linked account. If he's transferring funds through shell names, the moment those accounts stall, he'll notice, but too late." The words felt heavy, yet comforting. Actions, not emotions. Tasks I could control. She clicked her pen and handed me the first form. "This authorizes a fraud alert through all 3 bureaus. You'll get confirmation in 72 hours. I signed it, the pen gliding smooth across the line. "He always handled our finances," I said quietly. "He said numbers bored me." "Numbers don't bore people," she said. "They expose them." We worked through the morning. Bank statements, retirement accounts, property deeds. Each document felt like a page torn from a story I thought I'd already finished reading. Nancy read with a sharp calm that made even betrayal sound solvable. "See here," she said, pointing at a line of digital transfers. "Recurring payments to Preston Holdings. Small enough to look like routine fees, regular enough to be deliberate." I leaned closer. "He made them every Friday." "People betray in patterns," she said. "They crave order even in deception." By noon, we had mapped the trail. 1 shared checking account, 1 secret brokerage fund, 2 unauthorized transfers. She printed copies, labeled each set with a date, and slid them into a folder marked simply evidence. "Next step," she said, "is power of attorney." The phrase still made me flinch. "He forged mine," I said. Nancy's eyes lifted, steady. "Then we'll use his forgery against him." She opened her drawer and pulled out another document, an identical template, this time with an additional clause requiring biometric verification. "We'll file this version today," she said. "That way, any POA using your old signature becomes void. If he tries to act under the forged one, it'll flag the system." I looked at the blank line waiting for my name. For the first time, signing didn't feel like surrender. It felt like reclaiming oxygen. When the ink dried, Nancy made 3 copies. "Next, we track communication," she said. "You'll forward every email, every text, every transaction alert. Nothing deleted, nothing rephrased." The afternoon light slanted across her desk, catching the silver in her hair. She paused, then leaned back. "Tell me about the woman," she said softly. "Her name's Camille," I said. "I think she's in debt. She said something about her mother's surgery." "Desperation breeds compliance," Nancy said. "But that doesn't excuse it. We'll find her signature on something she shouldn't have signed." She's the one who changed the beneficiary, I said. I saw her name on the email. Nancy tapped her pen. Then we trace it from there. She opened her laptop and pulled up a blank document titled Chronology of Events. Line by line, we filled it together. The rain, the trip to Ruth's, the driveway, the papers on the table, the names. When we reached the end, she saved the file with the timestamp. "This is your record," she said. "No one argues with timestamps." I exhaled slowly. "He'll know something's wrong soon." "Good," she said. "Let him wonder what." Before I left, she gave me a small flash drive. "This holds everything," she said. "Encrypted. Keep it off Wi-Fi, off your phone. And B, don't tell anyone. Not even your daughter yet." "I won't. Call me tomorrow after you check your accounts again. We'll move to phase 2 then." Outside, the afternoon had cooled. I stood on the sidewalk, the flash drive warm in my pocket, small enough to fit between my fingers, but heavy enough to change everything. Across the street, a bakery window glowed. Inside, a couple laughed over coffee. Two people who still trusted the sound of each other's names. I turned away before the ache reached my eyes. Driving home, I passed the lake. The water mirrored the sky, gray and still. I rolled down the window and let the air in, a thin breeze carrying the smell of damp earth and spring. I thought about Nancy's words. Paper never lies. I thought about Martin's careful smile, about the woman's folded jacket, about trust written in ink that wasn't mine. At home, I went straight to the study. The desk looked unchanged, as if the morning had never happened. I opened the drawer where he kept envelopes and found another file labeled House. Equity line. Inside, a statement stamped, authorized, B. Langford. I studied the signature. Mine again, but not quite. The curve of the L leaned left, uneven, almost shy. My real hand never trembled there. I took a picture, slipped the paper back, and closed the drawer softly. In the kitchen, the ceramic bowl still held my ring, light catching along its crack. I touched the edge, running my thumb over the line until it felt warm. The house was quiet but no longer empty. Every object had a story now, every silence a purpose. I sat by the window until evening came, watching the driveway fade into shadow. The porch light stayed off. Somewhere beyond the trees, thunder murmured like a warning too far to fear. I whispered to the quiet, "Let him move first." Tomorrow, the real work would begin. The next morning began with the sound of birds tapping against the window, as if the world hadn't changed overnight. I made tea instead of coffee. I needed something gentle. The house felt too large now, every wall filled with echoes of things I once trusted. When the kettle hissed, I realized I hadn't spoken aloud in hours. Silence can start to sound like company when you live inside it long enough. The phone rang mid-morning. Lydia's name lit up the screen, and for a moment, I almost didn't answer. She always heard more in my voice than I wanted to say. I pressed accept. "Mom, are you home now?" she asked. "I am. I thought you were staying with Aunt Ruth longer." "I was. Plans changed." Her tone softened. "Is everything okay with Dad? He said you two were sorting some paperwork." The words landed like a small stone in clear water. Ripples spread fast. "Did he say what kind of paperwork?" "Something about refinancing the house. He said it was just routine. He asked if I'd help print a few things." My pulse steadied. Not faster, just firmer. "What kind of things?" "I don't know. He mentioned needing a witness for a form. I told him I couldn't unless you were there." He laughed and said, "Oh, your mother's fine with it." But I wasn't sure. "You were right not to sign," I said quietly. "Mom, is something wrong?" I took a breath, letting it out slow so she wouldn't hear it shake. "I just need to check a few things. That's all. Can you come by this afternoon?" Of course. When she arrived, the day had turned brittle with light. She looked so much like him when she was serious, the same careful way of standing, arms folded like she was guarding her heart. I offered tea. She said no. She wasn't ready for small comforts. I handed her a photocopy of one of the documents Nancy had printed for me. "Look at the witness line," I said. She squinted. "E. Whitaker." She frowned. "That's Aunt Ruth." I shook my head. "It's not her signature." Her eyes widened. "He forged Aunt Ruth's name?" "Someone did." I watched her try to steady her breathing. "And look at the second page. My signature's there too." She traced the pen strokes lightly with her thumb. "You didn't sign this." "No." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The clock ticked, slow and indifferent. She sat down, setting the paper flat on her knees. "I always thought you two were unshakable," she said. "Even when I moved out, I told everyone you were what marriage was supposed to look like." "We were steady," I said, "until the ground changed underneath us." She looked up. "Does he know you know?" "Not yet." "Then what are you going to do?" "I'm doing it." She nodded, unsure what that meant, but trusting that I did. The way she looked at me, half fear, half respect, reminded me of the first time she realized I wasn't invincible. That was years ago when she fell off her bike and saw me cry before comforting her. Children never forget the day they learn their parents can bleed. "Mom," she said, voice lower, "there's something else. He asked me to confirm a notarized email last week. It said you approved a change to your insurance beneficiary. I deleted it. It didn't feel right." "Do you still have it in your trash folder?" "Yes." "Forward it to me. Don't say anything to him." Her fingers trembled slightly as she scrolled through her phone. The message appeared. Subject line: Authorization verification. Attached was a scanned ID, my name printed beneath a signature that wasn't mine, and an unfamiliar email address hidden in the reply chain. "Keep that," I said. "You just became my most important witness." Her mouth tightened. "I don't want to be in the middle." "You won't be," I said gently. "You'll be standing on the right side. There's a difference." We sat quietly for a while. Sunlight shifted across the table, landing on the ceramic bowl by the window. The gold edge of my ring glimmered in the crack, as if it had caught the conversation mid-sentence. Lydia followed my gaze. "You took it off," she said softly. "Yes." She reached out, touching the bowl. "It's beautiful, even with the crack." "Especially with the crack," I said. "That's how the light gets through." Her eyes shone, not from tears exactly, but from something deeper, the kind of sorrow that comes with understanding too soon. "I hate that he put you in this position," she whispered. "I don't," I said. "It's showing me who still stands with me." She nodded. "You're not alone, Mom." The words carried more strength than she knew. When she left, the house grew still again. I stood by the window, watching her car back out of the driveway. The air smelled faintly of rain, though the sky was clear. I thought about all the forms that carried my name, but not my hand, about trust turned into currency. On the table lay the photocopy of that fake signature, Ruth's name, written in a hand that didn't know her laugh or her kindness. I picked it up and folded it neatly, slipping it into the envelope marked evidence. Outside, The magnolia petals had begun to fall, pale as paper. I opened the window and let one drift inside. It landed on the floor and stayed there, perfect in its stillness. That night, I called Nancy. "My daughter found a document," I said. "Good," she replied. "It means we're closing in. Tomorrow, we verify the chain." I hung up, turned off the lights, and let the house fade to quiet. Somewhere beyond the walls, a new rhythm was forming, a pulse of certainty that no one could forge. The next morning broke heavy with fog, a kind of quiet that wraps around sound and won't let it go. I'd barely slept. Every creak in the house felt like a secret clearing its throat. The documents, the signatures, the forged witness line, they had stopped being suspicions. Now they were facts that needed air. I brewed coffee, though it tasted bitter, and dialed Nancy's number. She answered before the second ring. "You're ready," she said, not asking. "I want to know how deep it goes." "Then today we listen," she said. "Don't confront. Don't question. Just record." I drove to her office again, the flash drive in my purse, my nerves tucked neatly behind polite determination. Nancy met me at the door with two small devices. One looked like a pen, the other a car key. "Audio recorders," she said. "If he mentions transfers, keep him talking. Every word is gold." "I'm not good at pretending," I admitted. "You don't have to pretend," she said. "Just let him explain himself." By noon, I was home again. Martin's car was parked crooked in the driveway, as if he'd arrived in a hurry. The porch smelled faintly of cologne, sharp and unfamiliar. I took a breath and went inside. He looked up from the dining table, startled but trying to hide it. "B," he said, forcing a smile. "I thought you were still at Ruth's." "I came home early." I set my purse on the chair, feeling the small recorder hum inside. "I missed my own bed." He laughed too quickly. "Well, that's good. I was just catching up on some paperwork." I glanced at the folder in front of him. Bank logos, spreadsheets, the kind of clean order that only numbers could fake. "Anything interesting?" I asked. "Just planning ahead," he said, "making sure the retirement funds are balanced. You know me, always cautious." The recorder blinked quietly in my pocket. I poured myself water, careful to sound casual. "Planning something specific?" He hesitated. "We might move some assets soon. A short-term hold overseas. Diversification." "Costa Rica?" I said, watching his face. He froze, the way someone does when they realize they've been heard before. "Why would you say that?" "I found a brochure in the study," I lied. "It looked nice." His shoulders eased, but his voice stayed tight. "It's just an idea. Lower taxes, warmer weather. I thought you'd like it there." I smiled faintly. "You're always thinking ahead." He changed the subject fast, talking about dinner, the news, small things that sound like safety. I let him. The recorder caught every breath. Later, when he went upstairs, I slipped into the study. The computer hummed awake. I plugged in the flash drive Nancy had given me. It opened a small program that mirrored recent emails. Within seconds, I saw one with the subject line: IRA transfer. Authorization. The sender, Camille Preston. Attached was a PDF with electronic signatures, his, mine, and a notary stamp. I clicked on the stamp, and there it was. The date of birth listed for me was wrong, off by 4 years. A mistake no one close to me would ever make. My heart stayed calm, but my hands shook. I saved the file, named it Wires Proof, and logged out. Nancy called that evening. "Did you get anything?" I did, I said. An email about the IRA and a wrong date of birth. She let out a low whistle. That's fraud, B. They didn't just move property. They touched your retirement. That's federal. Do we report it now? Not yet, she said. We let them hang themselves with their own paperwork. I'll set up a secure archive. You'll keep recording. He'll reach out again soon. Greed hates silence. I turned off the lights, leaving only the faint glow of the window. Outside, the fog was lifting. Through the blur, I could see the faint outline of the magnolia tree, its blossoms already browning at the edges. Beautiful things never last long enough. But truth, when found, stays. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with the recorder beside me. I played the audio back in low volume. His voice filled the room, steady, practiced, familiar. Yeah, a short-term hold overseas. Lower taxes. She'll like it there. The recording ended with the soft click of a glass against the table. I rewound and listened again, slower this time. Not anger, just comprehension. The next morning, I sent the audio and the file to Nancy through the encrypted folder. She replied within minutes. Got it. This is the third layer. They used the LLC as a pass-through to cover the beneficiary switch. We're almost there. Almost. The word felt like the first exhale after months of holding breath. That afternoon, while Martin showered, a new email pinged on his phone left on the counter. The subject line read, Confirmation, Preston Holdings. I took a photo without opening it, then turned the screen off. When I looked up, I saw my reflection in the stainless steel kettle. Small, pale, but calm. The kind of calm that comes when you stop waiting for someone to save you. Later that night, I stood by the window, watching the porch light sway slightly in the wind. Somewhere beyond the glass, the quiet began to sound less like fear and more like focus. I whispered to the dark, You taught me to keep records, Martin. You just didn't think I'd use them. The clock ticked past midnight. Outside, the fog had cleared completely. The house looked sharper in the moonlight, its edges defined, its secrets no longer hiding in shadow. The following morning felt strangely bright, as if the world had decided to ignore everything that had happened. The sun reached through the kitchen window, landing on the same ceramic bowl that still held my wedding ring. Light glinted off its cracked edge and painted a thin gold line across the counter, like an underline beneath a truth I could finally read. I poured myself coffee and checked my email. A message from Nancy waited at the top, brief and precise. Meet Harlan Pierce. Trusted neighbor. He has something you'll want to see. Harlan lived 2 houses down, a retired postmaster who still waved to everyone even when most had stopped waving back. He'd known us for 20 years. He had seen the seasons turn on our porch, and probably heard more arguments than he ever admitted. I walked over late that morning, carrying a basket of scones as if it were just another neighborly visit. He opened the door before I could knock. "B," he said with a smile that reached his eyes. "Come in. Nancy told me you'd stop by." Inside, the air smelled faintly of sawdust and coffee. He led me to his den, where an old television sat beside a cluttered workbench. "She said you might be interested in some footage," he said, tapping his phone. "Doorbell camera caught something odd the morning you left for your sister's." He clicked a button, and the screen filled with an image of my front porch. There was Martin, standing in the drizzle, hauling a heavy box into the house. The timestamp matched the day I'd driven away. Behind him, a woman waited by a car I didn't recognize. She was slim, with her hair tied back, glancing around like someone who knew they shouldn't be seen. Harlan paused the video. That her? He asked gently. Yes, I said. The word came out thin. He nodded. I figured. She came by again that afternoon. Stayed about an hour. Thought you might want the video files. Copied them to this drive. He handed me a small flash drive labeled Front Door 0314. Why are you helping me, Harlan? He smiled in that slow, deliberate way of old men who've seen too much to rush an answer. Because fairness doesn't happen on its own. Folks like us have to keep it honest. I thanked him, meaning it more than I could say. When I left, the breeze carried the smell of lilacs from his garden. I hadn't noticed how sweet the neighborhood could smell when you're no longer pretending everything's fine. Back home, I plugged the drive into my laptop. The footage played in silence, the drizzle, the box, the careful glance toward the street. Martin unlocked the door, motioned her inside, then turned once to look around before following her. I watched it twice, maybe 3 times, until the details etched themselves into my memory. Then I saved a copy to Nancy's encrypted folder. An hour later, my phone rang. Lydia. I've been thinking about everything, she said quietly. I want to help. You already have. No, I mean really help. I called Aunt Ruth. She confirmed she never signed anything for Dad. She said if you need a statement, she'll write one. That will matter, I said. Thank you. There's more, she said hesitantly. Dad texted me today asking if I'd come by tonight to help him scan some forms. He said you were tired and didn't want to deal with it. I told him I'd check with you first. I looked out the window at the street, where sunlight trembled on the hood of his car. Don't go, I said. But forward me that text. We'll use it later. She exhaled. Okay, I just don't understand why he'd do this. Because some people would rather rewrite the story than admit they lost their place in it. She was quiet for a moment, then said softly, I'm proud of you, Mom. Those words settled deeper than she knew. When the call ended, I opened Nancy's chat window and sent her a short message. We have video proof and family confirmation. Her reply came almost instantly. Perfect. Keep the original safe. Next, we prepare the trap. Evening approached quietly. I sat by the window with the curtains half drawn, watching the light fade from gold to gray. For the first time, I felt less alone in what I knew. Truth is heavy until someone else helps you hold it. Later, Harlan walked by on his way to the mailbox. He looked up and gave a small wave. I waved back. It wasn't just politeness. It was recognition. The kind that says, I saw what you saw. I'll stand with you. Inside, the house no longer felt hostile. The silence had changed temperature. It was warm now, purposeful. The files on my computer glowed faintly in the dark like tiny lanterns. Before bed, I printed one still image from the video. Martin at the door, Rain on his shoulders, the faint outline of the woman beside him. I slid it into the folder labeled Truth. Then I sat by the window, watching the porch light across the street flicker on in Harlan's yard. It blinked twice before settling into a steady glow. It reminded me that sometimes justice doesn't announce itself. It begins, quietly, neighbor to neighbor, one shared certainty at a time. That night, for the first time in weeks, I slept without the sound of rain. The next few days passed with a strange stillness, the kind that comes when all the pieces have been gathered but not yet played. Nancy said to wait. Waiting, I discovered, was its own form of work. Every breath had to sound ordinary. Every glance had to look unaware. And still, beneath that quiet surface, a plan was forming, Careful, lawful, exact. Nancy's voice on the phone was calm as always. He's confident right now, she said. Confidence makes people careless. That's when they confess. How? I asked. Bud, we give him a stage, she replied, and let him walk right into it. By Thursday, everything was ready. Nancy arranged a meeting at our house under the pretense of signing a few updated financial papers. Routine maintenance, nothing dramatic. I agreed, of course. I even texted Martin a small smiley face and said, "Nancy's dropping by to help us tidy things up." He responded with a thumbs up. That afternoon, I brewed tea as if the world were normal. Lydia came over quietly and helped set the table. She didn't ask questions. She didn't need to. She was part of the plan now, though she didn't know every detail. When Martin arrived, he was in one of his better suits, the blue one he wore when he wanted to appear trustworthy. He kissed my cheek lightly, too lightly, and said, "I didn't expect Nancy to get involved again. That's a surprise." "She offered," I said. "You know how she likes things neat." He chuckled. "That she does." Nancy arrived right on time, briefcase in hand, her expression perfectly polite. "Good to see you, Martin," she said. "Just some updates, standard estate documents. We're adding a verification clause. New regulation." He smiled. "Of course." She spread the papers across the table, her tone casual but precise. "Here's the revised power of attorney form. Nothing changes for you two. Just confirmation that all prior documents are void. It keeps everything clean." He skimmed it quickly, too quickly, before picking up the pen. "Always more paperwork," he muttered. "Yes," Nancy said smoothly, "but it keeps the government happy." She gestured to a notary section near the bottom. "We've included biometric verification, just a fingerprint check beside the signature." He blinked. "Fingerprint?" "Standard protocol now," she said, flipping the small device from her briefcase. "Simple press, confirms authenticity." He hesitated, then shrugged. "All right." He placed his finger on the pad, then signed his name. Nancy glanced at the screen, then at him. "Perfect. And this is being recorded for accuracy," she said lightly, as though reading from a form. "Voice acknowledgement is optional but recommended." He laughed. "What? You don't trust me?" She smiled. "The state doesn't trust anyone." He leaned back in his chair, grinning. "Fine. I, Martin Langford, acknowledge that this signature voids all previous powers of attorney. There. Happy?" "Ecstatic?" she said, pressing a button on her phone to mark the file complete. He didn't realize it wasn't just the notary app recording. Another device, hidden in the base of her briefcase, had been running the entire time. Nancy gathered the papers and slid them into her folder. "One more item," she said casually. "I'll need to cross-check the previous POA to make sure the revocation aligns. Could you confirm which one you last used?" He hesitated again. Too long this time. "It's probably on file somewhere." She looked up. "Was that the version Camille drafted?" The name landed like a stone dropped in still water. His smile flickered. "You've been talking to her?" "I talked to many advisors," Nancy said lightly. "But I'm curious. That document, did you prepare it yourself?" He tried to laugh. "Of course not. Camille handled the details. I just followed her instructions." "So she had you sign on behalf of your wife?" His tone sharpened. "It was a joint decision." I watched him, quiet, steady. "Was it?" I asked, étonnante. His eyes darted toward me. For a moment, the air in the room thickened. "B, this is just procedure. Don't make it dramatic." I'm not, I said softly. Just listening. He sighed. Fine. Yes, Camille helped. She said it was safer to transfer things under my name. It was temporary. Nancy clicked her pen, calm as a surgeon. That's a clear statement of consent and authorship, she said. Thank you, Martin. He frowned. What do you mean? Just notation, she said, closing her folder. For compliance. When she left a few minutes later, he poured himself a drink. Lawyers, he muttered, always making something complicated. I said nothing. I waited until I heard her car drive away before speaking. You didn't have to mention Camille. He looked up sharply. She's a professional. Is that what she is? He scowled. You're tired. Let's not start this. I'm not starting anything, I said, my voice steady. You already did. He turned away, muttering, but the tremor in his hands betrayed him. Later that night, Nancy called. We got it all, she said. Full acknowledgement. His words, his voice, his consent, and the recording is clean. I closed my eyes, feeling the first real breath of relief I'd had in weeks. What now? Now, she said. We wait for Camille to make her move. The real one. I glanced toward the window. The porch light had flickered on again, steady and bright. I whispered, It's about time. The next morning arrived too quietly, the kind of silence that feels like a pause before thunder. I had spent the night half awake, listening to every sound the house made, each creak, each sigh, as if the walls were whispering about what they had witnessed. The folder Nancy had left sat on the kitchen table, neat and closed, like a sealed confession waiting to breathe. By mid-morning, my phone buzzed. An unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something in me said to answer. Mrs. Langford? The voice was low, unsteady. Yes. This is Camille Preston. Her name settled in the air like dust after a fall. I said nothing, letting silence do what it does best, make the guilty fill it. I need to see you, she said. Please. It's urgent. Where? Your house. Today. Before he gets home. I didn't say yes, but I didn't say no. When I hung up, I stared at the ceramic bowl on the counter, the crack along its side, the glint of the ring inside. Fragility could be beautiful. It could also be sharp. By noon, a black sedan pulled into the driveway. Camille stepped out wearing a navy coat that looked too expensive for her state of mind. Her hair was tied back tightly, but her eyes betrayed exhaustion. When she reached the porch, she hesitated before knocking. I opened the door before she could. Come in, I said. She followed, clutching a leather folder to her chest. Her perfume was faint but familiar, the same one that had lingered in my kitchen weeks ago. I didn't come to fight, she said quickly. I came because I don't know how to fix this. Then start by telling the truth. She nodded and sat at the table. Her hands trembled as she placed the folder down. Your husband told me it was legal, that you'd agreed to restructure the assets. I believed him. You believed a man trying to sell his own home behind his wife's back? Her face flushed. He said you were ill, that you needed him to handle things before the bank intervened. I almost laughed. He's clever. I'll give him that. She opened the folder, revealing papers, emails, notarized forms, payment receipts. When Nancy contacted me last week, I panicked. I thought I'd lose my license, but then I saw the recordings she sent. She looked up, tears sharp in her eyes. He used me. I thought I was helping. You were helping yourself, I said quietly. Her gaze dropped. My mother's surgery. The bills kept coming. Evan said there was an opportunity. Help him finalize the transfer, get a commission. I told myself it wasn't wrong if the paperwork looked right. Did you forge the signatures? She shook her head quickly. No. He gave me scans he said you'd approved. I only formatted them. But I did adjust the beneficiary email to route through Preston Holdings. That's on me. I slid Nancy's folder toward her, opened it to reveal the printed transcript from the recording. He named you, said you handled the documents. Camille pressed her palms to her temples. Then it's over. Evan drafted everything. He said if anything went wrong, he'd pin it on me. He's the one who made the fake notary. He used a real license, changed the birth date. Look. She pulled out her phone, scrolling to an email. Here, Evan Hale, ashburyrealty.group. He sent the drafts, the scripts for the calls. I can forward everything. Do that, I said. She looked up, desperate. Will you help me? I'll testify. I'll give you everything. But I can't go to prison. My mother, she won't survive alone. I studied her for a long moment. Beneath the panic, there was sincerity, the kind born not from guilt alone, but from the ache of realizing you were someone's tool. I don't want to destroy you, Camille, I said. I want the truth to stand. If you tell it, you'll keep your freedom, but you'll do it publicly. She nodded quickly, tears falling now. I will. We sat in silence for a moment. Outside, a delivery truck rolled by, breaking the stillness. Then I asked, Does he know you're here? Her expression changed, fear flashing across it. No, he's been calling since morning. I turned my phone off before I drove here. I stood. Turn it back on. She hesitated, then did. Immediately, her screen lit up with notifications. 10 missed calls, 3 messages, 1 voicemail. I nodded toward it. Play the last one. She hit speaker. Martin's voice filled the room, tense but careful. Camille, delete the drafts, now. They trace the notary ID. Don't answer any calls. We'll fix it when I get back. Don't do anything stupid. Her eyes widened. He knows. Good, I said softly. Now he's afraid. Nancy arrived 20 minutes later, perfectly on cue. She'd been waiting down the street. When she entered, she nodded politely to Camille. I'm glad you came clean, she said. This will make the next step simpler. What next step? Camille asked Ed. Nancy opened her briefcase and placed a recorder on the table. You'll give a full statement, voluntarily. Then we forward it to the authorities. If you cooperate fully, you'll be protected under witness disclosure. You'll face charges, but minimal ones. Camille's voice broke. And him? Nancy's tone was quiet steel. He'll face the rest. For the next hour, Camille spoke. About Evan, about the shell company, about the fake signatures and the money trail that led back to Martin. Every word went into Nancy's recorder. Each confession another stone laid into the foundation of justice. When it was over, Camille looked drained but lighter. What happens now? She whispered. Now, Nancy said, we let the truth travel. As Camille gathered her things, she turned to me. I'm sorry, Mrs. Langford, for everything. I nodded once. Don't apologize. Just tell the truth when they ask. That's how you fix it. She left quietly, the sound of her car fading down the street. Nancy turned to me. You handled that perfectly. Her evidence closes the loop. The email chain, the recordings, the transfers, it's airtight. What about Evan? We'll forward his name to the Financial Crimes Unit. He'll be easy to trace. I exhaled, feeling the weight shift off my chest. So, it's done? It's beginning, Nancy corrected. But the end's in sight. That night, I sat alone in the living room. The lamplight fell across the folder labeled Truth, its edges worn from use. Through the window, the streetlight flickered once, then steadied. The quiet felt different now, not the silence of ignorance, but the peace that comes when you know the storm is finally turning toward its rightful target. I didn't sleep the night before. The house felt too alert, like it was holding its breath for what was coming. The papers were ready, the recordings stored safely, and Camille's confession neatly transcribed. Nancy had called late, her voice calm and measured. "He'll come home tomorrow. Let him talk first." People about to lose control often mistake it for confidence. So I waited. By mid-morning, I heard his car in the driveway. The tires crunched over gravel the way they always did when he wanted me to know he'd arrived. The front door opened, and he stepped in, loosening his tie like a man walking into his own courtroom. "B," he said too casually. "We need to talk." I didn't stand. "We do." He sat across from me at the dining table, the same table where we'd signed our mortgage 20 years ago, where we'd eaten every Christmas dinner, where I'd once thought partnership meant trust. "I've made some mistakes," he began, running a hand through his graying hair. "But nothing we can't fix." "Define we," I said. He smiled tightly. "You and me. This marriage. It's just money, B. It got complicated. You never liked dealing with finances. And so you decided to forge them instead?" His jaw stiffened. "Don't exaggerate." I reached into the folder beside me and slid 2 printed airline tickets across the table. Costa Rica, 2 seats, one way, booked under Langford and Preston. He froze. "Where did you get that?" "I think you meant to leave earlier," I said softly, before anyone started asking questions. He leaned back, his eyes narrowing. "You've been talking to her." "She came to me." He laughed bitterly. "Of course she did. The moment things get hard, everyone turns on me." "Not everyone," I said. "Just those you lied to." He reached for the tickets, but I kept my hand over them. "It's over, Martin. Camille's statement, the recordings, the transfers, it's all documented. Nancy filed the revocation yesterday. Every account you touched has been frozen. The living trust is in place. The house, the accounts, the assets, they're no longer yours to move." For the first time, he looked uncertain. "You can't just take everything." "I didn't," I said. "You gave it away. You just didn't read the fine print." He stood abruptly, pacing. "Do you have any idea what you're doing? You'll ruin me." "I didn't ruin you," I said quietly. "You did that all by yourself." The silence between us stretched thin. Outside, the wind shifted, pushing the curtains inward like a breath. He turned to face me, the anger in his eyes fading into something more hollow. "I was trying to fix it," he said, almost pleading. "The debts, the loans. I thought if I moved things around, you'd never have to know." "And Camille?" I asked at the artist. He hesitated. "It started as business. And ended as what?" His mouth opened, but the answer didn't come. Instead, his shoulders dropped. He looked smaller, somehow, like the structure that had held him upright was finally giving way. I reached for the document Nancy had prepared and slid it toward him. "This is your statement of acknowledgement. It confirms your involvement in the transfers and your agreement not to contest the trust." He didn't touch it. "You want me to sign my own sentence?" "No," I said. "I want you to sign your truth, for once." He stared at the paper, then at me. The seconds stretched long. Finally, he picked up the pen. You won't stop, will you? No, I said. Because this isn't revenge, Martin. It's repair. He signed. The pen scratched across the paper like a small surrender. When he set it down, he looked at me, really looked, the way he hadn't in years. You used to trust me, he said softly. I did, I replied. And you used to deserve it. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. I stood and gathered the papers. Nancy will collect these in an hour. I've asked her to prepare the rest of the filings. You'll stay at the townhouse on Elm until further notice. The restraining order goes into effect tonight. He exhaled slowly. You've thought of everything. I had to, I said. You taught me to plan. He walked to the door but stopped halfway, his hand on the frame. What happens now? You start over, I said. Somewhere honest. He nodded once, then stepped outside. The door closed behind him with a soft click, the sound of something ending without breaking. For a long time, I didn't move. The house felt lighter, not empty but breathable again. The wind shifted through the open window, lifting the curtain so sunlight spilled across the table. I looked down at the ticket still lying there, 2 names printed neatly side by side. I folded them in half and placed them in the folder marked Truth. When Nancy arrived, she found me standing by the window. He signed, she said, seeing the papers in my hand. He did. Then it's done. Almost, I said. There's still the part where I learned to live in peace. Nancy smiled. That's the easy kind of justice, the kind that stays. After she left, I turned off the lights and sat quietly, watching the last of the daylight stretch across the driveway. The air was still, the silence steady. Somewhere in the distance, a single wind chime rang. It was the first time in months that the sound didn't hurt. The courthouse was quieter than I expected, the kind of quiet that absorbs footsteps and keeps secrets. Nancy walked beside me through the corridor, her briefcase clasped tight, her expression unreadable. You've done the hardest part already, she said. Now it's just process. Process. Such a clinical word for something that had rewritten my life. Inside the hearing room, the air smelled faintly of paper and polish. Camille sat 2 rows ahead, her posture rigid but not defensive. She turned once, meeting my eyes briefly, a silent acknowledgement. She looked different now, as if the weight of truth had changed her shape. On the opposite side, Martin sat with his lawyer, pale and expressionless. He didn't look at me. Maybe he couldn't. The judge, a woman with silver hair and steady eyes, began promptly. We're here to finalize the Langford estate revisions and address the related financial claims. Her voice carried the authority of someone who had heard every version of betrayal imaginable. Nancy presented everything with the precision of a surgeon. The recordings, the forged documents, the video of the delivery, the email chain that tied Evan Hale to the fraud. With each piece, the room grew quieter until even the sound of turning pages felt intrusive. Martin's lawyer tried to object once, but the judge silenced him with a raised hand. I've read the files, she said, and the evidence is clear. When it was over, the judge's verdict came simply. All contested assets revert to Mrs. Langford under the living trust established 2 weeks ago. The fraudulent power of attorney is void. The defendant, Mr. Langford, is ordered to undergo financial counseling and restitution review. Ms. Preston is granted leniency based on cooperation and is sentenced to 1-year probation with community service. Mr. Hale's charges will be handled separately by the district attorney's office. There was no applause, no gasp, just the quiet hum of finality. Camille began to cry softly, not from punishment, but from release. Nancy squeezed my shoulder. "It's done," she whispered. When we stepped outside, sunlight flooded the marble steps. I hadn't realized how long I'd been holding my breath until I finally let it go. The air tasted sharp, like new beginnings. Reporters waited near the street, but Nancy guided me past them. "You owe no one a performance," she said. "Justice isn't entertainment." I nodded. "I know." At the bottom of the steps, Camille approached. Her eyes were red, her voice trembling. "Mrs. Langford, I wanted to say thank you for not destroying me." "You did that yourself," I said gently. "But you stopped in time. That matters." She handed me an envelope. "It's a letter for your lawyer. Proof that Evan paid me through his firm. It shows everything. I wanted you to have it." I took it. "Make your mother proud, Camille." "I'll try." She walked away slowly, her shadow stretching long in the afternoon light. Nancy checked her watch. "We'll file the closing documentation today. Within a week, every account, every deed will be secured. You're officially protected, Bea." I smiled faintly. I thought I'd feel triumphant. "And you don't?" "No," I said. "I just feel clean." She understood. "That's better." We parted outside the courthouse. I drove home with the windows down, the wind combing through my hair like forgiveness. The road wound through familiar trees, the same ones I'd passed 1,000 times. But they looked different now, taller somehow, as if standing straighter for me. When I reached the house, the driveway was empty. The sight was almost beautiful. The light hit the magnolia tree just right, making its blossoms glow like lanterns. I stood for a long moment before unlocking the door. Inside, the silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was peaceful. I walked through each room slowly, touching the edges of tables, the frames on the walls, reacquainting myself with what was mine. On the kitchen counter sat an envelope from Nancy, delivered earlier that day. Inside was the final confirmation. All accounts secured, trust finalized, property title restored under my name alone. At the bottom, she had handwritten one line: "Justice delivered quietly still counts." I smiled and set it beside the ceramic bowl. The ring still lay there, catching the afternoon light. For a moment, I considered putting it back on, not out of nostalgia, but as proof that I'd survived. Then I closed my hand over it and whispered, "No, not this time." I slipped the ring into the folder marked Truth. Not as evidence anymore, but as closure. From the porch, I could hear the faint sound of wind chimes from a few houses down, Harlan's yard again. Their song carried softly across the neighborhood, rising and falling like breath. I leaned against the doorframe, breathing in time with it. Somewhere inside, a small piece of me that had stayed frozen began to thaw. Justice hadn't roared. It hadn't demanded. It had simply arrived, quiet and complete, like dawn. When I stepped back into the house, the light followed me in. I thought about all the women who might still be standing at their own windows, too afraid to look closer. And I hoped one day they'd understand what I had come to know. Silence isn't weakness when you learn how to aim it. A year later, the house no longer felt like a museum of broken promises. It had learned to breathe again, softly and steadily, as if it too had healed. The magnolia outside bloomed earlier that spring, its blossoms brighter than I remembered. I stood by the window, holding a cup of tea, watching petals drift across the empty driveway. For the first time in a long while, emptiness looked beautiful. Martin hadn't returned since the court ruling. His townhouse lease had renewed twice. Nancy said he attended his sessions, paid what he owed, and kept his distance. I never asked for more than that. Justice had done what it was meant to do: set boundaries, not build prisons. Inside, the kitchen smelled of wood polish and lemon. Lydia was on a stool near the front door, drilling tiny screws into a wooden plaque. The metal letters gleamed even in the soft light. Langford and daughter. She looked up when I entered. "I think it's straight," she said. "It's perfect." Her smile was gentle, proud. "You sure you want it by the door?" "Yes," I said, "right where everyone can see it." She tightened the last screw and stepped back. The plaque caught the afternoon sun, casting a faint reflection across the entryway. The sight of it brought a quiet satisfaction I hadn't expected, a sign that the story was no longer about loss, but about what came after. We walked out to the porch. The wind carried the soft sound of chimes from Harlan's yard, steady and calm. He waved from across the street, his usual greeting. I waved back. Lydia followed my gaze. "He's been good to you," she said. "He reminds me that community is louder than betrayal," I said with a small smile. She laughed. "You sound like your workshop notes again." "Oh, those notes have paid off. The last class filled up fast," I said. After the court case, Nancy and I had started a small series at the community center. Free workshops for retirees on protecting finances, avoiding fraud, and reclaiming independence. We called it Quiet Power, Protecting What's Yours. Every session began the same way: Nancy explaining credit freezes and legal safeguards, and me telling them a softer truth: that silence could be strength if you learned when to use it. Lydia brushed her hands on her jeans. "Mom," she said carefully, "I got an email this morning from Camille." I looked up. "She wanted to thank you again. Said her mother's surgery went well. She's volunteering at a community bank now, helping seniors review their documents." "That's good," I said, feeling something warm loosen in my chest. "Maybe she found her own way to make amends." Lydia nodded. "She sent a letter for you." She handed me a small envelope, the handwriting neat but humble. I opened it carefully. The letter was short. "Mrs. Langford, you didn't have to show me mercy, but you did. I think about that every day. You taught me that integrity isn't a single act. It's a habit we rebuild, one choice at a time. Thank you for letting me begin again." "Camille," I folded the letter and set it on the table beside the teapot. "She's learning," I said. "You taught her," Lydia replied. I smiled. "Maybe we taught each other." The afternoon sun drifted lower, brushing the porch in gold. Lydia gathered her tools, humming softly. I stepped outside and ran my hand over the wooden plaque again, feeling the texture of the carved letters. Langford and daughter. The name felt whole, anchored, forward-looking. When she left for work, the driveway was empty again. But it didn't feel lonely. I watched her car turn the corner, her laughter still faint in the air. The light shifted, touching the magnolia petals scattered along the path. I picked up one petal and held it to the sun. It glowed faint pink, almost translucent, a symbol of something delicate yet enduring. I let it fall and turned toward the house. Inside, the kettle began to whistle, a small domestic sound that somehow meant everything. I poured another cup of tea and sat by the window, where the shadows of the magnolia branches danced on the walls. The house had grown quiet again, but this silence was different. It wasn't watchful or waiting. It was earned. As evening settled, I turned on the porch light. It flickered once, then shone steady. Outside, The wind carried the scent of rain, distant but coming. I left the window open, letting the cool air drift in. From where I sat, I could see the reflection of the plaque in the glass door, our name shining faintly beneath the porch light. It looked almost like a signature, one written not on paper but on time itself. Sometimes justice ends in a gavel, sometimes it ends in a letter, or a name reclaimed. For me, it ended here, in the quiet hum of a home that finally belonged only to itself. The driveway stayed empty long after dark, and somehow, that emptiness felt full. I always thought windows were for looking out, at the world, at what we think we're missing, but somewhere along the way, I learned they can also show you what's still inside. The same glass that once reflected my fear now held the calm outline of a woman who had survived it. It's been a full year since everything settled, though settled feels too simple a word. Nothing about this kind of peace is passive. It's built, brick by quiet brick. On Tuesday mornings, I walk to the church hall where Nancy and I hold our workshop. The sign outside reads, "Financial Awareness for Seniors," but everyone who comes knows it's really about something deeper. Inside, the air always smells faintly of coffee and old hymn books. People gather around folding tables, neighbors, widows, retired teachers, one or two men who come because their wives told them to. We start each session with the same story. Nancy covers the legal basics: credit freezes, power of attorney, trust protection, while I talk about silence. Not the silence of fear, the other kind. The kind that steadies your hand before you sign your name. The kind that waits instead of shouts. Justice doesn't always need noise, I tell them. Sometimes, it's just a single signature written in the right moment. When I say that, people nod. Some slowly, some with tears they don't hide. We hand out small booklets labeled Truth Folder. A simple checklist, really, but it feels like armor. Watching them write their names carefully on those pages gives me a strange, fierce joy. After class, I stay behind to stack chairs and wash the coffee pot. The window above the counter looks out toward the community garden. Today, the light caught on the wind chimes hanging from the eaves. They sound softer now than they used to. Maybe that's just me hearing them differently. Nancy walks over, wiping her hands. "You still doing okay?" I smile. "Better than okay. It's peaceful." "You ever think about moving?" she asks. "Not yet," I say. "The house isn't finished teaching me." She laughs. "Then keep listening." When she leaves, I linger a little longer. I look through that window, the one that frames the garden, the sky, and a bit of the world beyond. And in the glass, I see both. The woman who once stood outside her own home in the rain, watching her life unravel, and the one who sits here now, whole and unhurried. They're the same, just on different sides of the same truth. At home, evening settles softly. The porch light glows steady, and the wind chimes song drifts in through the open window. I make tea and sit by the table where the plaque still hangs. Langford and daughter. Sometimes Lydia joins me after work, spreading her lesson plans across the table. Other nights, I sit alone, listening to the quiet rhythm of a life finally balanced. The ceramic bowl still sits on the windowsill, but it's empty now. I never put the ring back. I didn't throw it away either. I buried it beneath the magnolia tree last spring, right where the roots split into two directions. Every bloom that rises from that soil feels like forgiveness. I glance at the sky outside, washed in orange and blue, the colors that come only when day and night agree to share the horizon. In the reflection on the glass, I catch my own smile, small but certain. If I've learned anything, it's that justice doesn't erase the past. It reframes it. The betrayal, the silence, the rebuilding, they're all part of the same picture. You just have to step back far enough to see it. So I end my story where it began, at a window, the same place where I once stood, hidden in the rain, watching what I thought was the end of my life. Now, when I look through it, I don't see betrayal. I see light spilling across a clean floor, a home at peace, and a woman who learned that silence, when used with grace, can be the loudest truth of all. If you've stayed with me until now, thank you. Maybe you've known your own kind of quiet battle. Maybe you've learned that calm doesn't mean surrender. And maybe, like me, you've discovered that it's never too late to reclaim what's yours. Your name, your peace, your voice. The wind shifts again, brushing through the magnolia branches. The chimes sing softly, one note after another. I take a long breath and close my eyes. And just like that, the story ends. Not with a bang, but with the sound of home.